Hello, everybody. It is Sunday, and if you're not watching the Magic Sandwich Show, you're watching this one, Heretical Weekends number 30. This is our second sort of movie review show that we've done, um, and hopefully it'll be just as impressive as our last one. On the panel, the usual suspects: Run Gavagai Run and Turdle 2080. Hey,
Howdy.
my partners in crime. I'm an adopted atheist, bro. I hear so. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I thank you. I appreciate that. So, what we attempted to see originally was the movie Spotlight, which I believe was nominated for Academy Award.
Yeah.
It won.
No, it did.
It
Oops.
won
It won for what?
for Best Picture.
Okay, I missed it. Okay. And Don Verdean, which is sort of more of an indie kind of satirical comedy, I believe, right? Satire.
Yes.
All right. But I think those got trumped because God's Not Dead 2 was released. And our own Turdle, followed by Run Gavagai Run, went to actually go see it in the theater. And I only have the trailer to go by. And if it's as good as the trailer, then we're in luck.
Oh, you're in luck.
That's all we can ask if it's as good as the trailer. So what I will say, I'd like to go over a couple of things, and I took some notes because it doesn't look like, if you've seen the trailer, I'm pretty sure you've seen the movie, right? So
For the most part.
Yeah.
currently this movie sits at 3 out of 10 on IMDb, and it sits at a mighty 12% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is kind of close to where Batman vs. Superman is currently sitting. So,
Really? That's interesting.
yeah, not a lot of people are giving that movie a fair shake, so I could imagine, yeah. So anyway,
You mean you're talking about God's Not Dead too, right? Not many people are giving it a fair shake.
no, yeah. Well, here's the
A
thing.
whole bunch of atheist critics. That's why.
That must be it. The secular movement. What I would like to do, first of all, is to remind my compadres to please share this. But secondly, I'm going to defer to you guys because you guys went to actually see it. And I got a couple of questions that I wanted to kind of pose to you guys real quick. When you guys went to see it, out here in California, I have some Christian friends who are on Facebook. And, you'll hear once in a while, like, this was a great movie, the arguments are all awesome, this had people standing and clapping, and, somebody, I heard people say, when the guy's like, the kid at the end of the movie talking to Kevin Sorbo goes, how could you hate something that you don't believe exists, or whatever, and people are like, oh, snap, oh, they're like, basically,
Yeah, that was the first one, right?
Yeah. So, what is the overall impression of the second one? Now, you guys went into the theater. Is it mostly Christians? Is it a mixed crowd? Is there 12 people? Just going into the theater, what's it like? And where did you see it? Was it like an AMC, the major theater?
I saw it at the Marcus Theater, which is a major theater around where we live. There was a grand total of 6 people watching it. Now, granted, I did go see it on a Monday, I believe, so not exactly the prime time for movies, but yeah, it was myself, a friend that I made come along, and then there was a couple, and then 2 younger guys, and I'm assuming that those 4 people were there because they were interested in seeing the movie, not because they thought it would be funny.
So,
but
legitimately want to see
yeah,
the movie.
I assume. I don't know. Especially the couple. I assume they were there for reals. The younger guys, maybe not. Don't know. But yeah. So there was yeah, the 6 of us, and I never heard anybody reacting to anything other than myself occasionally laughing and trying to strangle myself at certain points. But that was the extent of the crowd reaction.
Because I think the Christian friends that went to see the first one, they went with like a bunch of other Christians. And I think maybe, because they hadn't really done a movie like that in a long time, or I don't know if even ever. God's Not Dead, the original one. So, it was pretty, I guess, inspiring for them, but...
Sure.
Is it 6 people, was that just you and your friends? Or was it 6 other people?
No, it was, that included me and my friend. So there was 4 people who are not me or my friend.
My experience was different.
Oh, please tell us.
Now, it's interesting. You know that God's Not Dead 2 was actually filmed in Arkansas, and it was even more than that. The high school where it was filmed is a local high school. Like, I watched the film in the same town where that high school that it was set at was, actually exists. And I drove to the high school. I will screen share. So this is the high school where the movie was filmed. I drove there and took these photos. Let me go. Like right afterward. Oops. And that was the restaurant I went to afterward. Just because I thought it was funny. The restaurant's not great, but I just thought it was funny to go to Sin Sin restaurant after I watched the film. There's me in front of their little panther statue out there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, right. So that's the high school where it was filmed. So there's local interest. People get to see things. The state capitol is featured in the movie a number of times. So I think there's probably more draw to this than maybe even the first one for just for local interest. But the theater was not packed out. I saw it on Saturday afternoon. I went to a 4:00 showing, but there were families. There were some probably more older people there than there were younger people. But there was at least one family that brought just a pack of little girls. I don't know if they were people that were on a team or something, and I'll talk about them later too, because I got to just overhear a little bit of their reaction at the end of the movie as I was leaving the theater. But it was probably a mid-sized crowd, I would guess.
What day did you see it?
Saturday afternoon, yesterday afternoon.
So that's a pretty good movie time as well.
Right, yeah.
Especially for families.
Yeah, you get a little discount with the afternoon, like a matinee kind of thing. And then people will go see a movie and then go out to eat afterward or whatever. So, but yeah, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't packed out. There were probably 3 people on, well, more than that. 3 people on my row that I could see, on my immediate left, and I don't know if there were other people down the row further, but I think every row had a few people in it. But like I said, it wasn't packed out. I would estimate around between 40 and 50 people for the movie where I was at, and the people were into it. I mean, they weren't cheering or whatever, but there was reaction, and I was, I think, the only person snickering or doing face palms or anything like that, and I kind of sat in the back so that I could see some of the reaction and things.
And so other people couldn't see yours.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't get burned alive.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, just so everyone's familiar, this is like a small clip of the trailer.
The most basic human right of all is the right to believe. No prayers, no moments of silence, nothing.
Think of the other children out there who are subjected to their repressive belief system.
If we sit by and do nothing, the pressure that we're feeling today will mean persecution tomorrow. We're at war. We look forward to seeing you at Woodlawn this coming week.
That's the promo. That was the commercial from the dude, from the white preacher guy in the movie. He did a little speech in the beginning saying, "Hey, come see this movie because we can't afford a real commercial." So there's a couple things in the trailer. Well, before we get to that, let's talk the cast. This is a movie review, so let's talk the cast. So Melissa Joan Hart, who was formerly Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah.
However, I never got the whole appeal of Melissa Joan Hart, just from a girly standpoint, I guess. But how is she in the movie? Because the casting is all over the place. So to me, it looked like they wanted to cast an innocent-looking Midwestern white girl. You know what I mean? Like that to play the victim here. Because this whole movie, if I'm not mistaken, looks like a big persecution complex. Like, I could imagine Trey Jadlow just masturbating to this feverishly.
I don't think so. He's actually posted things like criticizing the movie, saying it doesn't portray atheists in a realistic way, and so.
And how would he know what realistic anything is?
Well,
at least he's had interactions with atheists where this is more geared for people who live in a bubble that doesn't deal with atheists.
Yeah, exactly.
So Melissa Joan Hart, how has her acting improved at all? Because the trailer the dialogue looks really forced in some situations. There's a scene in the trailer where she says, I'm not going to be afraid to say the name Jesus." Like, it's just really bad.
Well, it's hard to do. I would actually say she's okay in the movie. I mean, the problem is that the dialogue is bad.
Yeah,
so.
I would say it's more due the problem is more due to the writing. I thought she did a pretty good job acting, especially given the script that she was given to work with.
And there's even one scene where she's standing in the doorway and some they're not carolers, but some Christian supporters from her high school or whatever come and sing to her, and she starts getting emotional and starts crying. And I thought she was actually pretty convincing in that moment. Yeah. Now, I'll say, contrast to her, Pat Boone, who plays her father, is a ridiculous cartoon character, and made me laugh out loud multiple times. And that scene was actually very funny because she's being very emotional and having this, what feels like a sincere response to people supporting her, and standing right next to her is this cartoon character who's overacting all over the place.
In the trailer, he's the guy that says, "We forget that we have the basic human right to believe," or something.
Right, but that is that's not in the movie. That line, he says it's not. I can't remember it exactly, but it's like the right to believe in Jesus.
Yes.
Like, he specifically, it's not just some kind of vague belief thing. It's very specifically, I think he even says to know Jesus.
I actually wrote it down. I made notes during the movie on my phone.
You got a notepad and a little
He said, "This day and age, people seem to forget that the most basic human right of all is the right to know Jesus."
Yeah.
Oh, God. Unintended. Yeah, there's a lot of quotes in this, and just from the trailer, that kind of scare me in a way. White preacher guy from the first movie. Now, I don't know if he says this in the movie itself, but he says, "The pressure we are feeling today will mean persecution tomorrow. We are at war." Yeah, I know for a fact Trey Jadlow masturbated to that.
You know for a fact. Yeah, that's actually the scene. I was thinking we would get into that a little bit later, but if we want to jump into that now.
I'm sorry. I'm just kind of going through the dialogue itself. Now, is the dialogue as contrite as that? I mean, is it basically like...
Well, most of the movie... That's the one scene I mentioned to you guys when I first told you I'd seen this, that I felt like that scene pushed beyond just kind of annoying Christian propaganda into dangerous Christian propaganda.
Okay. Well, we can get into that when we get to more of the themes. I just kind of okay. So Jesse,
as far as that acting though, like I feel like most of it was who can we get, and then
we'll take this
film around that. I mean, Melissa Joan Hart is not like a superstar, but she's a name, and then there's a few other, like Ernie Hudson.
Right, fucking Ghostbuster. I was
Right.
like, Ernie is looking for work wherever he can get it. Let's be honest. But I mean, like Jesse Metcalf was in a movie where he fucked a bunch of chicks, and they all got mad at him trying to kill him. Right, like that was like a comedy. Like and Robin Givens, she had her deal. I mean, but it just looks like D-list celebrities at certain points, right? Like maybe floating into the C territory. But okay, so acting okay, dialogue bad. Right?
Well, some of the acting was also not good too. Most of the name actors were passable.
Pat Boone.
Well, now again, this might be just due to the writing, but what is it, Ray? What's his name?
Yeah.
RoboCop guy. His character was, I think, much more of a cartoon even than Pat Boone.
Yeah.
Is that the guy that says, I have him down as evil white guy because I haven't seen the movie yet, but it says, we are going to prove once and for all that God is dead?
Yes.
Is that guy evil, like senator guy or whatever?
Yeah.
I know him best from Twin Peaks. But,
yeah.
Did he ever play a good guy, though? Like, he just looks like an evil guy in every movie. Like, he's the quintessential bad guy in every movie.
Yeah. He is super over the top, yeah. I mean, he's a cartoon.
Yeah, well, and then the thing that's crazy is he's portrayed as this like evil genius, but he has no comebacks at all ever for anything. He talks tough until they get into it in the courtroom, and then he has nothing to say and no way to combat the stupidity of the the arguments.
Strobel and
does the black preacher guy from the first movie that's friends with the white preacher guy, does he have a prominent role in this one?
Not prominent, but he's there.
Yeah.
They show him for a second. I didn't know if it was another Jesus buddy movie that, like the first one.
No, not quite.
A lot more serious.
I don't know if it's more serious, but I can't think of as much intentional comic relief as there is in the first one, because you have their whole storyline is basically, comic relief in the first one, and Pat Boone was the comic relief, but not intentionally.
Not intentionally.
I still, the first movie, the first one is funny. I still laugh at the scene where Kevin Sorbo is having dinner with his snooty professor friends, and they're talking about stuff, and his girlfriend comes in, she goes, "I believe in Jesus," and he just looks at her, and he just looks at her with disdain, like he wants to throw her in the fireplace. I know we talked about that. I can imagine it in my head, like, you're sitting there having some deep conversation, and your wife comes by and goes, "I believe in Jesus." You're like, "Oh, shut the fuck up." But anyway, okay, so moving on. So the overall theme, is this really I know the characters are parody-ish, cartoonish, and stuff like that, but is the overall theme the underdog, stay stalwart in your beliefs in the face of adversity and blah, 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 right?
Yeah, it's exactly what you would think it is from the trailer.
No twist.
Should we say? I mean, let's talk a little bit, or I'd like to, if that's okay, to just set it up so that you can understand the premise.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
It's a teacher, and it is set in Arkansas, where this kind of parallel universe of Arkansas schools exists. I don't know, because this could never happen in an Arkansas town. But anyways, so the teacher is a history teacher. She's talking about passive aggressive civil disobedience. I'm sorry, and she's talking about Gandhi, And this girl who is one of the central figures in the story asks her, well, is what Gandhi says something like what Jesus says or whatever? And there seem to be some similar themes in what Jesus taught. And the teacher, who is a Christian, says, quotes, and I think it's from Matthew 5. I looked up the verse. She says, you have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. So she gives this quotation and says, yes, that's also very, very much along the lines of, peaceful resistance and things. And I may have that verse wrong. It's something similar to that, and it's from Matthew somewhere or other. But
From the Bible.
Yeah, well, and it's from the Gospels and from the book of Matthew. I know. So, but and like as soon as she leaves the classroom, it seems like, anyhow, the way it's portrayed, the principal is like on her and like walking her down to the principal's office or whatever, and she's confronted by the school board, and everybody is like appalled that she has said the name Jesus, gave a quote from the Bible, and in this history class, and supposedly this is against the policy of the school board, the local district, the state, and the federal. All of this, it's against their policy to say Jesus and to quote anything from the Bible. And so she gets in trouble, and that's the whole thing. And then she's given a leave of absence, and then they take her to court.
Yeah, does they want to like suspend her license or something?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they went into that depth or whatever, but
it kind of works. Because it's not actually the school board suing her. It's like the one student's parents. Like it's supposed to be like the ACLU goes and finds this one girl's parents and then gets them to sue her, and then the school board is going to just go along with whatever the court finds, basically. Like if the court rules in her favor, then she's fine, and if the court rules against her, then they're going to fire her and tear her to shreds. They're going to destroy every last fiber.
Throw her in the furnace.
In the trailer, Ernie Hudson breaks his gavel, so he's...
In the movie, he doesn't, though. I'm pretty sure.
No, yeah, he never breaks his gavel.
Wow. I hate it when they do that with trailers, when they just put stuff in there that isn't like close to what's in the actual movie. Did they have the scene where the guy says, "God bless you," the jury guy, and he goes, Jesse Metcalf goes, "Oh, be careful because we can see you."
Yep.
How did the preacher guy get on the jury?
Well, that's a bit of part of the plot. There is the prosecution, is that right?
Yeah.
Is out of, because they only have so many times where they can request a replacement without reason or grounds or whatever, or without the defense being able to counter their request for a replacement. So they just used up all of their replacement requests before he got put on there.
Yeah, and the one that they used it on was, of course, a military hero, this Marine who is God, country, and whatever.
Wow.
They were like, we got to get rid of him.
Right. They replaced him with the preacher dude. Well, okay, well, yeah, I mean, we probably should went over the synopsis of the movie first. It's just so transparent with the trailer. It's like, geez, they don't even try to hide it.
No, they're not. There's not any real mysteries in this movie.
I mean,
no subtlety whatsoever.
The character is named Grace. Isn't that a little on the nose?
Yeah. Well, Grace Wesley too. So it's Wesleyan nod to Wesley. What's his face? Right? Yeah. Wesley Snipes.
So,
the theologian.
So how long does the movie run? It's about an hour and a half?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Something like that. It didn't seem, I wasn't beating my head, thinking, oh, surely it's going to be over soon. So I think it went pretty fast, because if it had gone much longer than that, or they had tried to develop it further, I would have been pulling my hair out. Yeah.
So before we get into we're at war kind of thing, because we're getting into sort of the dialogue now. There's a few notes I took just from the trailer. You guys tell me if this is in the movie or if this is more of a theme to the movie or whatever. So Jesse Metcalf's character, the defense attorney, right? He says faith is on trial, right? Stuff like that. Like, you're trying to say faith is on trial, but that's exactly what's going on here. And then there's some rant that he says toward the end of the trailer. It says, if a Christian's right to believe is subordinate, then it's not equal, or something along those lines. And then Ernie Hudson's like, shut up, dude, I'm going to find you in contempt or whatever. And he goes,
shut up, dude.
I have nothing but contempt. I'm like, isn't that like from... That's like a 100-year-old line, right?
It's like out of A Few Good Men or something.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, what a badass. But it's just stuff like that. Is that stuff made it into the movie itself?
Yeah, that was, I think, other than the gavel breaking, was all part of the movie. What's the actor's name? I don't know.
Who, the defense attorney?
Yeah.
Jesse Metcalf.
Jesse Metcalf. Like, his character, like, is specifically not a believer. They very rarely use the word atheist in this movie, but he is possibly the only likable character for most of the movie. But then, yeah, that rant which takes place at the end of the movie, where he shouts that he has nothing but contempt for the court, really makes his character unlikable. But
what is he so angry at?
Because they're persecuting this Christian, which they are. I mean, it's ridiculous, because nobody would take the court's position in this case. Like, what she said in the beginning of the movie, which started this whole thing, was so nothing, and then it gets blown up into this giant court drama. And the funny thing is her answer to the question is fairly reasonable, but the question itself that the student gave in the beginning of the movie was weird and felt out of place. Like, she just randomly brings up Jesus.
Yeah. Well, and so just the background on the student, because that's a kind of one of the threads in the storyline, or in the plot line there, is that the girl, her parents are free thinkers, and they use that term in the movie.
Yeah, her parents are hilarious.
Yeah, and they're trying to raise their children. Well, her brother died in a car accident, and her parents are completely unfazed by this. I don't know how long before it was supposed to have happened. My guess, or if I don't know, the sense is that it was just a few months ago, but they're like, move on, we can't stop and bother to grieve for whatever.
Well, you wouldn't even know anything about it except for the daughter's reaction. Like, it's when you first meet that family, like, she seems discontent, and the parents are just oblivious. They're like talking about their jobs, and I mean,
so is the impression they want to give, like, there's a mischaracterization from certain apologists where it's like, well, if you're an atheist, why would you care about, you're just a bag of molecules, right? Like, you're just atoms, who cares what you do to another? You're just chemicals. Is that kind of like the unfeeling impression you guys get?
That's exactly what
it's not like they don't care about their kid, but like they moved on because they're just, a physical being.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. That's shitty. How many, if you were to clock how many minutes Melissa Joan Hart had sad face to this movie, just judging by the trailer, it's just like her sad face to the whole movie.
That's another thing too, is it portrays, like, presents Christianity as like as though Christians are just happy all the time, except for when they get attacked by atheists. Like her life, I mean, her dad's older, and he's getting up there in years, and she has to take care of him. But she's living this pretty much happy-go-lucky life. Other than that, and that's not even like a bad thing, really. And then until this happened, and then now, like wolves, all these atheists are coming at her. Her life was just peachy before that, and now it's all coming apart because of these mean atheists.
Well, the other thing, one of the teachers who is apparently like the head of the teachers union there has this thick Southern accent and whatever, and she's, I don't know, she seems a little dingy, but she's very like anti-God, anti-Christian, and whatever. And I just want to say, where are these teachers? Where have they ever been to anywhere in Arkansas where these kind of people exist? Because I mean, my wife is a teacher, and she is hit over the head constantly with God, and the teachers will pray for each other, and she's a believer. My wife is a believer, but she's just like, well, this is not everybody is, and it's not necessarily appropriate in the workplace, even when you're not, even when you're in the teachers' lounge and whatever.
It's bad when like another believer goes, look, everybody, simmer down.
Right.
Can I also just bring up how horrible of a this union rep is? Because she's brought in Melissa Joan Hart's character like immediately after this whole fiasco of her quoting the Bible, is brought into this meeting with the board. And she doesn't have an attorney, but she has this union rep at her side, and the whoever's in the leadership of the board is basically saying, is this this what happened? Did you quote the Bible? And then Melissa Joan Hart is like, well, yeah. And then the union rep says, what were you thinking? Like, that's her response.
I was wondering what you guys were talking about, because I hadn't seen it.
Yeah, so that's the amount of help that her union rep gives her pre-trial. Then in the trial, she testifies against her. That's her union rep. So
What's funny about this? Thinking about the kind of the comment you guys made about what she said wasn't even really that big of a deal. Kind of in the grand scheme of it was kind of in context to what. Don't you think the impression is that from a persecution standpoint, you can't even utter the name Jesus, right? Like, it's gotten that bad. So it's not like she's violating any real laws, like preaching in school and stuff like that. But now the persecution is you can't even say Jesus, you can't even mention, in context a quote to the Bible, or now you're in trouble.
I think it has to do with the fact that they don't understand what is meant by separation of church and state. Like they want it to be one thing, or to not exist at all, really. But they just think that anytime anybody has a belief, that the government is there to stop it. They think that's what separation of church and state is, and that's what they're portraying here.
Yeah, well, and then they did try to say that, or portray it that the atheists were saying she was preaching by bringing up this passage in the Bible, and the student asked the question, the teacher gave an answer. She could have even gone further, as far as I'm concerned, because I may be incorrect, but I believe that Gandhi took some inspiration from Jesus' example, and also from Plato. There's a fact of the matter from a historical perspective about what Gandhi did. And where he took his inspiration from, and also Martin Luther King, which was part of their discussion. And I don't know.
Well, and the other thing too is that she couched her language so carefully,
Yeah.
because she said the authors of the Gospels quote Jesus as saying, like, so she's not even in this case, like, she's putting it in such a context of, like, this is not necessarily what I believe, but here's what these authors wrote. So she's being as careful as she possibly could, really, in that situation. And like, if we can jump ahead here a little bit into the trial part, what is, to me, was really funny was kind of the third act reveal of, like, what, because it's funny because during the trial, like, to make it dramatic, they keep on having, like, these moments where it's revealed that Melissa Joan Hart's character had some sort of, like, church-related interaction with a coworker or something. Like, at one point, it's revealed that she invited the principal or vice principal or whatever she is to a church function where some of the students had or were getting honored for something or other, and that she had invited the principal on school grounds. And, like, oh my God, what a shocking revelation. But the funny thing is the way that the movie portrays it is, like, that's a negative thing. Like, the music changes, and then the reaction of both Melissa Joan Hart and her attorney at the revelation of this information is, like, oh no, this is going to work against us. And it just created this sense of, like, this unintentional subliminal message of, like, this is wrong. What they did was wrong, which is, of course, not what they mean, but they're trying to create this dramatic effect of, like, oh, this is going to work against her character in this case. But I just thought it was funny because there was a number of times where they did that. They revealed that she had done something or talked to somebody, and is always in this very tame situation, but it's the movie portrays it like it's this big deal that she went and she did this, which I thought was unintentionally funny.
The whole movie is unintentionally funny. So the court scene. So what happened in the? I mean, are we going to go spoiler alert or like?
Well, I think this whole thing has been spoiler alert, right?
Yeah, yeah, I guess.
Well, there's not that much to spoil in this. There's no Kevin Sorbo at the end of the first movie kind of moment.
I'm assuming she wins. But
yeah, she does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually to me was one of the funnier moments as well, as at the end. Might as well jump to the end here. But the girl who is her family is the one that's actually suing her. She's on Melissa Joan Hart's side throughout the movie. At the end of the movie, like, there's a whole bunch of, like, protesters outside of the building. For most of it, it's half and half for and half against. And you can tell the difference because the people who are for Melissa Joan Hart are sitting there quietly, holding signs about Jesus or whatever, and then the people who are against her are also holding signs, but they are standing about 3 feet away and screaming in their faces.
Yeah,
those are the bad guys, if you weren't sure.
It's like the WWE.
But then, okay, so inside the court, it's revealed that Melissa Joan Hart won. Yay! So then our kind of main character, high school girl, goes out and runs out to the people standing on the steps of the Capitol, and she says, she doesn't tell them whether or not they won the case. Instead, she says, "God's not dead," and everybody starts cheering. Like that makes any sense whatsoever. That's good enough. Apparently, they figured out what that means, I guess. But like, it makes absolutely no sense in the context of this movie because nobody's trying to prove, unlike in the first movie, that God is dead. Although the lawyer says that for some reason to the family in that, like you see in the trailer there. But it's nothing to do with that. There's a couple of loose references to God being dead or not being dead throughout the movie, but it just completely comes out of nowhere when she runs and says that to this crowd. And by the way, all the people there at this point are pro Melissa Joan Hart, and they all start cheering and chanting, "God's not dead, he's surely alive."
That's the theme song of the trailer, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a big music number? Because
Of course there is.
Trailer. Okay, how does that come into play?
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The girl, the redhead girl who is like the blogger from the first movie who has cancer. Yeah. She's her cancer has gone into remission because Jesus and his backup singers, the Newsboys or whatever they are. And so that's how they kind of tie in the Newsboys band again. And she's in contact with them, and she's now blogging about this court case, and she phones in to the concert live, and they're holding the phone up to the microphone at the concert, and everybody's praying for the jury to make the right choice and help Sabrina the Teenage Witch to say that she's not guilty.
Yeah, it just seems like they crowbarred those guys in, right? So
completely. I mean, at least in the first one, it was like they set up early in that movie that Josh, was that the main character, was going to go to this concert.
Yeah.
And so at least it made sense.
There was some reason for it, yeah.
Yeah, and you had the paths colliding where just like outside that concert there was like that's where Kevin Sorbo, I don't remember why he was going there, but he was just outside the concert when he gets, spoilers, killed. But in this one there is it's such a loose connection, and by the way, that concert that she phones into is apparently going on in the middle of the day. That's when she calls, and it's of course as full a crowd as for all I know it's the same footage from the first movie other than a little bits of dialogue, but
they don't have much budget to work with.
They spent it all on Melissa Joan Hart.
Yeah.
Budget went to Melissa Joan Hart. Oh man. So okay. So on a scale of 1 through 10. What do you guys rate this movie?
1 through 10. Well, what are we?
Like IMDb, man, like 10 stars, like.
Yeah, but what if we're doing like just general entertainment value?
Yeah, if you were a critic and you were to rate the value of this movie, or to you, right? Because it's from your perspective. What would you rate this on a scale of 1 through 10?
1, I guess.
It's like the worst movie you've ever seen, or one of the.
No, it's not. But I mean, it also has, and we didn't get into the propaganda part. I mean, it has some very negative I mean, it depends on, like, if we at some point get into a society where it's much more rational than the society we live in, I could see this as I could recommend this more highly, because I can trust that people will view it through a rational lens. But when you're talking about the society that we live in currently, I have to take that into account, and it's the amount of entertainment that somebody like me might get out of it is not worth the negative aspects of this movie's propaganda.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the propaganda a bit. So, because that's something that you wanted to talk about. What sort of sparked that earlier in the show was that guy's quote that says, "We are at war."
Yeah. So the context of that scene is that he is part of the jury at that point in time, and I say at that point in time because at a later point in time he gets sick or something and has to actually be removed from the jury. But spoilers. he's part of the jury, and it's like apparently a meeting of pastors. Is that what you got out of that,
Yeah,
Gavin?
yeah. Well, and this is what is his name? Fred Thompson, who was previously a candidate for president, or trying for the GOP nomination back in a couple of election cycles ago, anyways.
Yeah, he was. I know him from like Law and Order and stuff as well, but yeah, he comes into this room where it's these pastors who are like just kind of having a brunch or something like that, and he informs them all that the government wants to get a hold of all of these pastors' transcripts from their sermons for the last several months. If maybe you remember better than I do, Gavigai, but I was under the impression that it was related to the court case, but maybe it wasn't. But it's idea of like, oh, the government is now like trying to reach into their faith, essentially. And there's one guy who's probably the worst actor in the whole movie, who is kind of the sort of rational one amongst those guys, and he's like, well, I'm sure I shouldn't even say he's rational, but he's saying like, I'm sure that it's, they have the best intent or whatever, and kind of trying to downplay the fear of the government reaching in and getting their transcripts. And then, as you see from the trailer, the white preacher guy is like, oh, I don't know about that. And I mean, you have to keep in mind too that this white preacher guy, through both these movies, is just this kind of laid back, easygoing, kind of cool, I guess, guy. But he's not at all some sort of like conspiracy nut or anything. But then in the context of this scene, he does say, like, he's like, well, I'm on this court trial, where, and obviously I'm not quoting this exactly, but he's saying that, it seems like we are coming under fire, and like you see from the trailer, like he ends it by saying, we're at war here, and it's not in the main movie, and I didn't stick around through the credits. I don't know if you did or not, Gavigai.
No.
But and then I should skip ahead a little bit, because then later in the movie, when he's supposed to go and give his transcripts, when he goes to the office to do that, instead of giving him their transcripts, he gives them a note that explains why he won't be giving them his transcripts. And then that's more or less the end of that part of the storyline within the movie. But apparently, and you can see it actually if you watch the trailer, after the credits there's a scene where the white preacher guy the police come to his house, and then they arrest him and then take him away.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Boy, I wish I had known that.
I didn't know it until I rewatched the trailer after seeing it. I was like, oh, that was not in the movie. But then I read somebody's review where they talked about the post-credits scene, and I was like, oh, that must have been the post-credits scene. But yeah.
Are they setting it up for a trilogy?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think that they're leaving that door open. If not that, maybe what they'll do is they'll make a movie about how all the atheist critics are going after God's Not Dead 2, and that'll be the story of God's Not Dead 3. But yeah, I thought that scene was, like, it took it to a different level, in my opinion anyway. What did you think, Gavigai?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. Because you had messaged us and said, well, there was a scene that you thought took it to a dangerous level, and when I saw the movie, I was kind of thinking, oh, I wonder what Turdle was seeing, or which scene he meant or was referring to in that, and the one that I thought was when Mike Huckabee also from Arkansas. Way to go, Arkansas. Makes an appearance. They have these little segments on there where media people sometimes make appearances on a TV that's being broadcast in the hospital room or wherever. But Huckabee's there, and he's having a conversation with somebody and saying how there will come a day, or there may come a day, when Christians will have to decide if they're going to follow the law of the land, or if they're going to follow God. And just this whole idea
that's something a politician should be saying, right?
Yeah, right. It just, to me, it feeds into this whole idea, and the scene you're talking about does that too. But that one day we're going to have to take up arms and fight, and become militaristic almost. And so that was worrisome or bothersome to me.
Even if it's not like militaristic, just this us versus them, they're coming to get us.
Yeah.
Mentality was very disturbing to me. I mean, it's bad enough. Like, the first movie was bad enough just because it was obnoxious and just this fantasy world of Christian persecution. But in that case, it wasn't like this. It was this one guy, really, who's coming, and being an asshole. And and there are other asshole atheists out there, but it's not like this implication of this whole systematic, like the world is closing in on us, it's trying to get us type of thing, and that's the big difference for me in this movie.
Anytime you use war as a, what I mean, like it sort of sets the tone, and I think you hit the nail on the head where the world is closing in around us, and I think in the trailer, Melissa Joan Hart says, I'd rather stand with God against everybody, or something like that.
I'd rather stand with God and be judged by man than stand with man and be judged by God.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you guys wrote that down, because I certainly didn't remember that. But,
I wrote it down in my heart.
But yeah, you kind of hit on the head. It sort of gives you like this impression, like they're this little light in the darkness that's closing in around them, and they got to dig their heels in and stand up to this growing atheism, secularism, anti-theism, that's going on around them.
Well, or kind of reduction of Christian privilege, that's the big threat, in my view.
And I am very much not politically correct, but I gotta say, Arkansas Christians, really, you're persecuted? I mean, kind of like what Gabriel said, where's this fantasy land where all these people exist? Because they don't. You know what I mean? Like that's why when Trey posts those persecution articles, I just laugh. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
Just stop, dude.
Yeah, I started to get into this earlier, and then I segued out of it. But talking about like the big third act kind of turn is when Melissa Joan Hart has this revelation that she could, if they prove that Jesus was a real historical figure, that then because she was in a history class, that it would actually make sense that she would quote a historical figure. And like the funny thing is, it's like, yeah, no shit. Like, what were you guys doing this whole time? Like, or you don't even have to prove that he's a historical figure, but you're just talking about him in the context of being a historical figure. But
it's in the trailer, right? Like in the trailer that I saw, Jesse Metcalf goes, "We're gonna prove that God or Jesus is a real person," and the evil guy goes, "Are you kidding me?" or something like that. Right?
Yeah, well, that's when they get into the real kind of apologetics portion of the movie.
Yeah.
Then they bring in, is it Lee Strobel? Is that right?
Yeah, Lee Strobel and what's his name, Wallace.
the line that made me strangle myself was Lee Strobel's first argument, which was that he can prove that Jesus existed by looking at our calendar, and that we live in the year 2016 AD, which proves that Jesus existed, right?
Right.
It's based on Jesus' life and death.
I saw that movie on Saturday. So Saturn we can prove that Saturn is a real god.
Yeah. Just look at the calendar.
Right.
But yeah, that part was pretty obnoxious, because that's kind of, you were referring to it earlier when the prosecution just is completely baffled by these apologetics arguments for the existence of Jesus, which, like, it's so goofy, because then it does become about trying to prove whether or not Jesus really existed. It's like, what the fuck are we watching?
Right. Well, the judge allows it. Right. So at the start of the case, the judge sets it up as, okay, this is about the Establishment Clause. You know, was she in violation of the Establishment Clause by quoting the Bible and blah blah blah, and then they jump into this whole thing, and the prosecution doesn't object. There's no question about. They don't bring any counter witnesses to testify or whatever, or say, well, these guys are one side of this debate, but they're biased because they're Christian apologists, and that both of them claim it's J. Warner Wallace is the other person who is the author of a book called Cold Case Christianity, and he's I guess from, what is it, the Los Angeles crime department or whatever, I don't know, law enforcement of some kind, and has a background in looking into murder cases that have gone cold, and he digs up testimony from people who no longer exist, blah blah blah. Well, that's his credentials, and so he thinks he's looked at the evidence for Jesus and the evidence of the Gospels, and he's convinced now, having come at this from the perspective of an atheist, that it's undeniable that Jesus was crucified, and that all of the things that are recorded in the Bible are credible anyways. So, but the whole idea that you even need to establish the historicity of the Gospels in order to say that the Bible is a historical document. I mean, it's certainly had influence in our culture, and that it has influenced movements like civil rights and the use of civil disobedience, I think, is undeniable. That's all you had to do, and the whole idea that you bring in these quote-unquote experts to testify about the Bible has nothing to do with the trial. It has nothing to do with the Establishment Clause.
There's another very small and mostly subtle moment where I forget which one of the two of them, of the apologists, say something like historians have to admit that Jesus existed or something, but he very specifically uses the word admit, which made me chuckle, just because it's obviously trying to paint them in a way they don't want to admit that Jesus existed. Either that, or as though historians have to also admit that Napoleon existed, and that's what they do. They admit these things. George Washington, yeah, he existed, I guess, but they have to. They're forced to admit these things.
Right, but if they seem to think that even if it was demonstrated that Jesus was a real person and existed, blah 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 blah, it doesn't mean that he God, essentially.
Right, and Melissa Joan Hart never claims that in
Right.
the classroom. She just quotes this part of the Bible, which should completely eliminate the whole trial right then and there. But it goes on. But yeah, but just that one, the usage of the word admit, like I felt like was a clear trying to paint Christianity as the underdog in this case.
Not to harp on people online here, but there's some Christians on here that will, let's say, bring up a point, like a certain point that them and the atheist that they're debating will agree on, and they go, oh, okay, so you concede that point. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that word has a lot of baggage, right? They couldn't say, okay, we agree on that point, but they will say something like, you concede that point, which makes it seem like they got one over on them. You know what I mean? Like, you have no choice but to accept it now. There's a whole different connotation, and that's kind of the same thing. The whole admit. Saiton Bruggencake used to do that all the time in his conversations too. So, all right. So now that we got through, is there anything else you guys want to say on this movie besides, before I ask you what your rating is between?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to. Where did I put that? Here it is. So this is an example, actually from Arkansas, recent, of where a teacher went way past the establishment clause, and this is something that ACLU is actually looking at. So I wanted to hang on, let me move it to a different screen so that I can screen share it. The teacher showed the film The Passion of the Christ, and this was in a history class, so there's this as well. But this is the study guide that the teacher included in his lesson or whatever. As the kids were watching, they were supposed to be thinking about these questions and I guess providing a written response. So he said the Passion of the Christ, and he says, the seeing of this movie change your perspective on Christ's suffering for your salvation and the degree to which Christ loves you. I mean, first of all, shouldn't be showing the Passion of the Christ in that class, because it's inappropriate for one thing, and even though this is a high school class and those kids have probably seen other things, but it's just, should a teacher be showing these things? And it's also very obviously very biased toward Christianity. And then this question thing, the study guide, is way over the top, proselytizing. Consider a time in your lives. I mean, it just goes on and is just beating them over the head. Christ deals with the tempter by crushing it underfoot. What temptations slither near my foot? Do I crush them? Are you kidding me? Just, why not show something like this? Why can't you make your Christian character do something like this? And then, this would be my version of the movie, where I would put this up, and then have the ACLU have real actual court cases, have the actual arguments that are presented, and there's no reason to make up a storyline like they do with all of this stuff. It's so ridiculous, and they're just they make us atheists. They vilify us by putting words in our mouths that none of us would ever utter, and arguments that we would never try to make, and then build up their own stuff. Oh, it's infuriating. And I mentioned earlier there was this group of little girls, and they were clearly deeply impacted by this film. My guess is they were 9, 10 years old, somewhere in there, as they were leaving the theater and talking about how they cried at the end, and oh, what a good movie this was, and I just, I wanted to say, look, that's not reality. That's not the world that we live in on almost any level. Aside from the fact that that high school is like 3 miles from where we're watching this in the theater. So that's all I had to say.
Yeah, they do really vilify atheists in general in this, and like I said earlier, they rarely use the word atheist. I think it maybe pops up like 2 times in the movie, but clearly anyone who's opposed to Melissa Joan Hart in this movie is atheist, if not in name and practice. And there it does start to make me uncomfortable, just because, like, and I don't want to go overboard here, but there to me there are certain similarities between the way atheists are portrayed in this movie and like what you would see in anti-Semitic movies, in the 1930s or 40s or whatever.
Right.
Like just the way that the atheists are portrayed as these, just blatantly evil people who are impinging on and have all the power and are impinging on the Christians who are just trying to do the right thing and
motivated by emotion and passion rather than by reason and a concern for justice. I mean, this ACLU, they're pursuing this teacher because it wouldn't be right for another person of a different faith to proselytize in the classroom. If that was a Mormon and the Mormon was talking about Joseph Smith and showing a movie about Joseph Smith and trying to convert his students over to that, no parents would appreciate that unless they were Mormon. But even then, people understand when you're the minority, that's when it's most important for you to have protections against these things. And Christians, may well be headed in that direction. Islam is growing in our country, and atheism is growing in our country, but Christianity is not.
Yeah, fuck 'em.
Amen.
All right, so I think we've exhausted the whole hour or so on God's Not Dead 2. I'm gonna go and take a guess and say this is gonna be a shit movie, and probably will rate 2 to 3 stars out of 10 for me.
I'd go 3.
You'd go 3?
I'd go 3 out of 10.
Because it can't be the worst movie ever. But
no, it's not. But it's got some baggage that brings it down for me.
Yeah.
I'm still going. I still think Left Behind with Nicolas Cage is probably got to be worse than this.
Left Behind with Kirk Cameron was worse.
All right. Yeah. All right. So, for the other 2 movies we were going to take a look at real quick, I only saw Don Verdean, so I have not seen Spotlight. I tried to watch it several times, but Daredevil season 2 came out, and so and I couldn't really handle like a movie that serious when I came home from work. You know what I mean? Like I kind of wanted to be like, all right, I need my superhero fix or something. So, did anybody else see Don Verdean?
I saw all of the movies, so.
Yeah, I saw Don Verdean too.
Oh, good. So let's talk about that one first then.
Yeah.
So, Don Verdean was great in concept, but I think it could have had the potential to be a whole lot better. Gavigai, do you want to give us the synopsis of the plot since you did for God's Not Dead?
Sure. Yeah. Just general overview. It's the idea that there's this quote-unquote archaeologist who goes into the Middle East, and I guess he went on some archaeological expedition back, I don't know when it was supposed to be, the 80s or the 90s, but it was sometime decades ago, and came back and wrote a book, talking about all of the things that he found that supposedly verify things that happened in the Bible, and so now that's kind of played out, and he's not doing very well financially and things, but he's got this opportunity from this pastor to go back to the Middle East and find something new that that will give more credence to the Bible, from an archaeological perspective, and so he goes out and makes a new discovery, but it's not what he's claiming that it is, and he knows that it's not, but he goes forward with it anyways, and so there's this whole thing of he's really scamming people. I don't know, maybe in the past the things may or may not have been what he was claiming that they were, as far as archaeological finds or objects and things, but I think he genuinely believed that they were, or that they very likely were the objects that he was saying that they were, whereas this time he knew for sure that it was not, and he actually took measures to kind of fabricate the evidence.
Yeah. So basically, he was a famous archaeologist, or he got famous for doing something a couple decades ago. He got hired by a church that was kind of losing their members to another church. So they hire him to gain artifacts, right, to gain favor.
Right.
And when he can't quite get them, he starts to fabricate them out of desperation. Chaos ensues.
Yeah.
All right. So I got to say, first and foremost, did anybody have a crush on the chick in this movie other than me? The actress's name is Amy Ryan. She played Carol. She had the glasses. She was Don Verdean's partner.
Sure.
I don't know why I was crushing on her this whole time. She's an older lady, but I was crushing her that whole time. It was the glasses. But I got to say, the cast itself was a great group, right? For me, Sam Rockwell was good. Danny McBride is hilarious in everything he does. I think that guy is awesome. But the movie itself, I think, is where it suffered, right? I almost think it tried to be too smart for its own good in a way.
I don't know if it was trying to be too smart. For me, it took a while before I realized it was a comedy. Because it's so dry. What is the actor who was the main character? What's his Sam? Is it Sam?
Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell is not necessarily like a comedic actor, but so he could go either way as far as whether it be a drama or a comedy. But it took a while for. I feel like it takes really until like Gavagai was talking about, where he fabricates the evidence on the one, and then he gets roped into kind of crazier and crazier situations with his co-conspirator.
Yeah.
That it really gets to be funny, and I think that's when I enjoyed the movie the most, was his co-conspirator is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, portrayed by Jermaine from Flight of the Conchords, for anybody that's familiar with Flight of the Conchords.
Yeah, the only part that I didn't really laugh though. I understand humor pretty well, and I get the parts that are humorous. But even the part where I was supposed to laugh, I think, for instance, when Don Verdean is trying to fling the rock with the sling, and he hits Carol, and Boaz, Jermaine's character, goes, "You hit her in the uterus," or something like that, and they all kneel and start praying, and she's like, "Ugh!" That was probably the funniest part, but that's because that's something I would say, but
that part actually kind of felt a little out of place to me, because that seemed more out of something out of, I don't know, Dumb and Dumber, or
almost slapstick kind of something.
Right. That's what I mean. But the other parts were humorous, but not funny to me. They were entertaining in a humorous way, but they weren't funny.
Right. They don't necessarily make you laugh out loud.
Yeah. So I don't know what the movie was kind of going for at times, you know, because Danny McBride he's great, but he's not a great satirical comedian. You know what I mean? And so I look at him and I want to laugh. Like, I want to laugh. I feel like I should be LOLing, laughing, you know? But I'm not in this movie. There's like, for me, there was a little bit of a disconnect, actually, part of the way through there.
I think it's a very dry humor, and I think you probably have to be in just the right mood to see it for it to really appeal to you. I went into it completely not knowing what to expect of it, and in fact, I'd never heard of it, and I didn't even choose it. My wife saw it on Netflix and turned it on, and I was like, "What is this?" And like Turdle said, for the first probably 10 minutes or so, I was like not even sure whether it was supposed to be, almost like a documentary or something.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
They did a real good job with that because I didn't even know who it was Sam Rockwell as the lead. So when they played the beginning, I was like, is this a documentary? Is this dude like a real person? Like for the first few minutes until the movie actually started. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like because I'm fairly similar to you, Heathen, and like it didn't quite land for me in any real satisfying way, and like I'm a Danny McBride fan as well. I feel like it seems like a perfect fit, like they have him kind of be, and to be fair, he isn't supposed to be a super sleazy pastor or anything. He's kind of run of the mill actually, and I think that actually kind of works against it. He almost seems slightly miscast in that role, just because you kind of expect Danny McBride to be more sleazy. And
I would have liked Danny McBride and the guy to play the guy from the other church, the Satanist church. The Satanist guy turned the other
Will
church.
Forte's character.
Yes, Will Forte could have been Danny McBride's character, and vice versa. Because to me, that Will Forte looks more like a Christian preacher. Like if you know what I mean.
I thought Will Forte did a good job as that character, though, and actually probably other than Boaz, he was probably my second favorite character. But
the part that actually did make me laugh was the way those guys would enter a scene. Like they'd be revealing something, and then they would like just rise up out of the crowd.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty funny. So yeah, like I said, to me, it just kind of missed the target, but it was still a decent flick, I gotta say.
Yeah, it's unclear to me what exactly the target was, and I will say, like, especially having seen God's Not Dead 2 in such close proximity to this movie, like they don't make anybody really a villain in this movie. I mean, everybody's at least partially the butt of a joke, but like they don't make Christianity out to be like this purely evil thing. I mean, Don Verdean, he does some bad things, but like he's trying to be a good person, and he's for the most part a likable character. When you take that in contrast with how atheists are portrayed in both God's Not Dead and the sequel, I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah, but I don't think that was the point of the movie. I think as close to a sort of antagonist as you would get is Boaz toward the end, right? To the last half of the movie,
yeah,
where he's trying to blackmail Don Verdean and all that. But the other part that was funny was when Carol gets mad at Don and she goes, "You pimped me out." And just when a girl says that, it's just kind of funny. I didn't expect that. She's just like, "You pimped me out" to Boaz. But yeah, that guy ended up being kind of like a real jerk toward the end. But I mean, like I said, the main character, yeah, he's not a bad guy. No one's really like a bad guy, quote unquote, right? There's no like villain.
Right.
It's just someone with good intentions that kind of lost his way a little bit.
Right, and I mean they're layered characters. I mean, not that any of these characters are fantastic, but there's more depth to basically all of these characters than all of the characters in God's Not Dead 2. And I mean the same is true of for the most part and we'll get to that in a little bit, but in Spotlight too, where I mean it's not just this villainous portrayal of people in either of the non-Christian movies.
Yeah. So, all right. So, Don Verdean, good movie, decent flick, rental. I think that's a Netflix night, right? Or Netflix night.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend it wholesale, but I mean, if you're looking for something and you got Netflix, it's worth checking out.
Sure.
All right. So, moving on to Spotlight. That was easy. I have not seen Spotlight, but it looks like a 2.5-hour drama that is probably going to cause me to play video games on my tablet while I watch this. It looks like if I sat in the theater, I'd be totally engrossed. But laying on my bed watching movies and stuff, I may or may not,
It's hard to say. I do think it's a good film. It kind of suffers because it does a lot of talking about people and things without explaining to you exactly who these people are or what their relationship is or whatever. Like if you're familiar with Game of Thrones, it's kind of like that, where they just drop you into this world and names come up and people talk about other people and you're not exactly sure who they're talking about throughout the whole thing.
Right.
And so that can be, but I appreciate that because I feel like that's a more honest way of storytelling, but it can be harder to get into when they do that.
The premise of the movie, if I'm not mistaken, help me out here, but it's basically an uncovering of some molestation in the Catholic Church by a news group. Am I close?
Yeah, and it's a true story. I mean, it's obviously a screenplay of real events. What was it? The Boston
Globe,
yeah, newspaper had a special kind of investigations unit in their newspaper that would work on stories over the course of months and things, and then publish at the end. And so that unit was called Spotlight. So they started kind of getting wind of corruption in the Catholic Church and cover up of child abuse that was really kind of endemic in the church, and then the church, instead of taking care of it and moving these priests away and out of the ministry, just shuffled them around to different places where they were able to then strike it up again and keep abusing children. So that and they were dealing as a news team with questions about, well, what does this mean for our newspaper? Do we run this? Will it be offensive to our readership? Do we have a social responsibility to publish these things, and how? And just from a purely financial perspective as well, whether they were going to get scooped on the story. They had invested time and money and all of these different things into investigating this, but certain things were kind of coming to light, and there was the potential that another newspaper would run the story before they did, and so they were doing their best to adhere to strict journalistic standards, and still get the story out kind of on the front end before other people did.
Well, the other thing too is that they're worried about, because at the Globe they had this Spotlight team which had been working on this and uncovered so much of the kind of details and the scope of the problem. They were worried that another newspaper would release a kind of fraction of the information, and it wouldn't land the way that it needed to land. it wouldn't have the impact that it needed to have. Just
Right.
the size and scope and the high level that this had reached within the Catholic Church. But yeah, so they're also concerned about it. They want this story to have the impact that it should have, and not just kind of be like, oh, okay, and then it gets swept under the rug and forgotten about.
Yeah, it's only 2 hours and 8 minutes, so it's not even that long of a movie. But the cast, I'm looking at it on IMDb. It's an amazing cast, right?
Yeah.
So Mark Ruffalo, which I really wish he would have turned into the Hulk in this movie. I would totally saw.
You haven't seen it yet, so.
I know. That. Does Mark Ruffalo turn into the Hulk? Because I would totally watch it first.
Yes.
In a way.
Yeah. Michael Keaton's in it. I don't think he's Batman, but but Rachel McAdams is pretty much a seller for me. Like there's three. So there's the Rachel McAdams, who, by the way, in some weird, not the tangent real quick, but when she was in Wedding Crashers, right, opposite of the blonde dude, I really wished her. I really had a crush on her character in the movie. I don't know why that's ever happened to anybody else, but I'm like,
you're just crushing on everybody.
like the character, I don't even know her as a real person. Like her character in the movie was just so awesome. Like I want you, but act like that. Liv Schreiber, I'm a big Ray Donovan fan. If anybody watches that show, he's awesome, and he was Sabretooth. So three of these guys are already superheroes, or been in superhero movies. And John Slattery, who was my favorite character from Mad Men, who I'm not sure if you guys or anybody out there is a Mad Men fan, but he played Roger on Mad Men. One of my favorite characters in TV history. So it's a great cast. I can imagine just the acting is on a level that most movies aren't.
It was good.
Yeah,
it's
it was.
Above God's Not Dead 2.
It's kind of the opposite of God's Not Dead 2. It really is in a number of ways, because you have obviously the Catholic Church is basically the enemy in this, or the antagonist, but because of that you have exactly the opposite kind of powers working against our characters, where the Catholic Church actually does have quite a bit of power, at the very, if not actual power, it has a lot of power in terms of people want to protect it kind of a thing.
Yeah, I guess, what is it, social capital, essentially, that they have influence and are revered to the point where people they don't want to blemish this image, because it has meaning for them.
Yeah.
These movies tend to come out. Does this movie sort of affect you guys in a way? Like I can go out and watch, God's Not Dead 2 and laugh about it, and just forget about it 5 minutes later. But is this movie like one of those movies that's kind of emotionally ties you in? Like, do you feel invested in this movie?
Me personally, I didn't, for the most part. There's basically one scene that kind of took it to beyond just kind of this is an enjoyable, interesting movie that made this movie kind of stand out a little bit, and that's basically a monologue that Mark Ruffalo has when they get this pretty damning evidence against the church. But for the most part, it's an interesting movie and I enjoyed it, but I think there was better movies last year, so
yeah, I didn't think it was necessarily the one that should have gotten the just because it didn't move me to that profound level that I would expect from Best Picture of the Year. Not
exactly.
That I know.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah. But to me, I think it did the impact that it had on me was realizing the scope of the problem, just the level of corruption that existed within the Catholic Church, and the horror that was the reality for thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people around the world, children who had to live with this and who were ashamed, who were just hurt and wounded and carried this terrible secret with them into their adulthood lives until enough of it's kind of bubbled up to the surface that they felt like, well, what, I'm not alone in this. I can come out, and that's, to me, that was really the thing that impacted me the most was the result of them breaking this story and all of these people coming out of the woodwork and saying, yes, I was a victim too, and I want my story told. I forget at the end they told how many stories they published, but it was a sizable number, and then they ran a list at the end, just before the credits, I think, of all of the numbers of victims in different cities around the world that have been discovered now to date or whatever, as far as the movie was at the time the movie was published. But
so I didn't want to cut you off, but I was trying to get in before you said that.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, this seemed like the kind of movie that when the movie was over had like a paragraph or something, like 1987, or something, and like
right.
And then you went along and said that. I was like, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things to like about this movie. Like, I liked that it avoided kind of the standard typical, because the movie basically starts with the new boss coming in, and I think most movies would have had like the new boss kind of be like the enemy of the Spotlight team. And there are concerns along the way for the Spotlight team, like are they gonna run into trouble with the higher ups or whatever? And I was pleased with the way that the movie didn't have like this adversarial situation.
They didn't play off cliches that they could have done. Yeah.
Very easily could have in most movies.
A lot of times when the new boss comes in, he or she is always an asshole, like right off the bat, like,
right.
Becomes the antagonist or like the roadblock.
Yeah, in fact, in this movie, he's actually the one who gets the ball rolling, and points them to this story and has them look into it. And they set it up like, because when he comes in, they're talking about like he's might have to make some cuts, and it's set up like, oh, maybe Spotlight might be on the chopping block, and it never goes down that road. But I mean, they set it up so you're not sure what to make of this new boss guy, but he's a reasonable boss.
He ends up being a good dude.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I didn't see it, so I can't comment on it. So this is going to be a real short review, audience. So you said it was a good movie. I'm going to go with that. Better than God's Not Dead. That just isn't hard to do.
Yeah, it's the pick of the week, I think, for religious-related movies that we watched.
Yeah.
I still think Ex Machina was a better movie and should have been both nominated and won for Best Picture last year. But
yeah, that was an excellent film. If that was released, I forgot what year that was released in.
That was last year, yeah.
Yeah, definitely worthy. Much more thought-provoking and had more depth to it than Spotlight. Now, Spotlight was a good story. It was definitely worthy of being made into a movie, and I think it had a lot of good qualities. But yeah, excellent.
Some guy did a set of movie posters, like honest movie posters, and I think for Ex Machina or Ex Machina or whatever, it just says, "Would you? You know you want to," or something like that. Like, like the whole movie is just like, "Would you bang a robot?" Like, yes. By the way, like there was a TV show on the old what they had here called Tech TV, and they did a show on sex and technology, and it's a montage of like different things, right? And then there's a clip of this chick that says, as human beings, every time we discover a new technology, the first thing we want to do is have sex with it. And I'm like, that is kind of right. You know what I mean? It's like we didn't get to, we had VR, and now that we're getting it down to like we can have it in the home, it's like, oh, here comes the porn. It's
Toasters, same thing.
Yeah, right. I was just gonna say blender. Maybe not.
You guys ever fucked a blender? They totally put out. It's easy. So, all right. Well, if that's it, I guess we can sort of pause out. And I know Turdle. I have not forgotten. So, Turdle posted something in the notes. So I like to say fuck Arcane Logos, as we always do. He gets a 1 out of 10 stars in everything in life as a person. He gets 1 out of 10 stars. So he is our God's Not Dead too. Anyway, that's
he's our cartoon villain.
I think, yeah, he's our cartoon villain. That's our movie review show. Hopefully we won't have to do this too often because these movies are really bad, but they're kind of fun to like joke at. Because what other movie are you gonna have a witch, a fucking Ghostbuster, and Mike Tyson's ex-wife all in the same movie? I mean, it's like amazing. So. All right, well, I'll see you all in 2 weeks, or we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Have a great weekend, everybody. Have a great Sunday, and don't work because Christians will kill you. That's the plan. In the Bible, I said it. Have a great one.